Hi everybody, welcome to another video in my Intro to HTML series. In this video I'd like to talk about headings and paragraphs. Headings. Headings are going to be tags that will introduce different sections of a web page. We might have an H1, the one up here that says a list apart, that's going to introduce an entire web page. We might have an H2 that's going to introduce the topic of that web page, learning from Lego, a step forward in modular web design. An H3 that introduces a subsection of a web page, rethinking status quo. We might even have an H4. Let's try and find one. I know we've got one somewhere on this web page. An H4, backgrounds and borders. And you can see that the H3s are orangish brown. The H4s are black and a little bit smaller. The H2 is larger and black, and the H1 is absolutely huge. Let's take a look at how they work in the markup. In the last video, I showed you this markup right here. I had an H1 here and an H2 here. I might have something like an H3 here. Subsection, subhead. I might even have an H4. And I can go all the way down to H5 and H6. I'm going to look at this in the browser and see what it looks like. So I will save, launch it in the browser, launch in Chrome. And here's what we've got. We've got our H1, our H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. You might look at this and say they get progressively smaller. And that's what headings do. That's accurate. Visually, headings have a hierarchy. There's a visual hierarchy. In other words, there's a largest one and there's a smallest one, and they get progressively smaller from largest to smallest. The largest heading is H1. The next one down is H2, then H3, then H4, then H5, then H6. They get progressively smaller in that hierarchy. But the size is not really what's important to us with these headings. And we'll get into that in a future video, but it has something to do with separating the way that we display content from the way that we structure the HTML. Those two things should be separated. H1 has a purpose. The purpose of the H1 is to be the most important headline on a page. H1 should only be used once per web page. Now there's this thing called a heading hierarchy. A heading hierarchy says that we use these headings in a specific way. Think about an outline. When you write an outline, you might have something like a main topic. And in that main topic, you might have several subtopics. Subtopic, subtopic B, subtopic C, all right? And under those subtopics, you might have subtopics. Roman numeral 1. Roman numeral 2. Roman numeral 3. Now, there's a hierarchy in the way that we use these headings. The numbers are only used for main topics. This one was main topic 1. This one was main topic 2. The uppercase letters are only used for subtopics. The Roman numerals are used for subtopics. All right? So we've got an outline. Headings are used in a very similar way. Each one of those heading numbers has a different function. H1 is meant to introduce the whole entire page. Okay, so maybe if I were designing a website that was going to be about the Minnesota Timberwolves, H1 would say Minnesota Timberwolves. My T-Wolves page. Okay? Now, in that My T-Wolves page, I might have several articles. I might have 4 or 5 different articles, and each one is about a different topic based on the T-Wolves season. All right? Each of those subtopics would be in its own article. So maybe I have an article like, I'll just go to the Star Tribune page, and I'll look up Timberwolves, and I will find their page. Here we go, is another 40-point game for Wiggins. Now, my main headline would be My T-Wolves page. The H2 would be Andrew Wiggins notches a second consecutive 40-point game in Denver. So I would put that here. And everything in this article would be directly related to this content. All right? I might have a subtopic. Maybe this article has a few different subsections to it. Maybe one subsection is Wiggins has a record 30-point third quarter, which didn't happen, but that would be notable, and that might be a subsection of this whole article. So that maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs below that would be about this topic. But this subtopic is still related to this topic right here of the article. Each of these headings are used to introduce smaller sections or subsections of an existing section. So H1 talks about the whole page. H2 talks about the whole article, so it would sum up everything in the article. The only time you would ever use an H3 is if you have smaller sections of a section. Let's go back to that A List Apart page. This whole website is a list apart, so that's my H1. It describes the whole website. The topic that we're on this page is Learning from Lego, a step forward in modular web design. So this whole entire article is about modular web design and learning from Lego. All right? Now, there might be subsections in this. This article is broken down into several subsections, 8 or 9 subsections if I recall correctly. The first one, Rethinking the Static Quo. That's the section number 1. Section number 1 talks about what the status quo is and how we should break away from it. Learning from Lego is the next section. So those would all be H3s. The next section, more flexible than Lego. The next section, discussion. And in the discussion, we have some subsections. So if discussion is my H3, when backgrounds and borders is my H4, because this is a subsection of this subsection. This is the heading hierarchy. You need to stick to it. You can't just go rogue and decide how you're going to use. I'm just going to use an H4 because it's a lot smaller, and I like those smaller things. We don't even think about the way they display in the browser or what they look like at all. We'll address the way things look like in future videos using something called CSS. The only way that we are using these headings is by sticking to the hierarchy. So you should use H1 once per page because that introduces the entire page. Once per article, you'll use an H2. If you have to break up that article into several sections, you'll use H3s. If you have to break up those subsections, you'll use H4s. You will probably never use H5s and H6s unless you have a very complex document. So you can almost forget that 4, 5, and 6 exist because you will probably very seldom ever use them. H2 and 3 you'll probably use. H1 you will certainly use. So those are headings. Headings are used to introduce sections of content. And you have to stick to that hierarchy. H1 being the most dominant, H2 introducing articles, H3s introducing subsections of those articles. Great, so that's how you use heading tags. Let's talk a little bit about the paragraph tag. Purpose of the paragraph tag is to define paragraph content. Now, what it does visually is it's going to separate chunks of text. I'm just going to copy some text from this article here. I'm going to get one paragraph here, and I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to get another article, another paragraph, and paste it in. And I'm going to get another paragraph and paste it in after that. All right, so I've got 3 paragraphs in there. You can see there are these spaces there. I've got my paragraph tags. I'm going to launch this in the browser, and we should see 3 chunks of text, right? Well, not really. I see that one paragraph and those other 2 chunks of text all clumped up together. What the paragraph tag does visually is it separates itself from all their text content and puts a space above and below. That's what a paragraph does, visually. But what it does for the meaning of that content is it informs search engines, browsers, and things like that there is a paragraph in that spot, that chunk of text is all directly related to one topic. So you think about how you use a paragraph in your composition classes. You've got a main topic, you've got some supporting sentences, and then you've got your conclusion in a paragraph. That's how you use the paragraph tag to wrap up all that stuff. Now, when you're looking at journalism, their paragraphs aren't necessarily structured like you would structure them in a formal paper. They're not going to have those parts that a paragraph would have. But the paragraph tag is meant to wrap up paragraph content. So if I want these 2 chunks to be separated, I need to surround them with the P tags. Open paragraph, close paragraph. Open paragraph, close paragraph. And there you have it. I've got some paragraphs in there. Now, what I've got right now for the structure of this page, if I zoom out a little bit, I've got my header with an H1, my article that has an H2 at top. I've got 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, and I'm going to delete this stuff here because we don't need it. And then my article closes. This is the standard structure for most pages that you're going to have. You're going to have header with your H1, you're going to have a series of articles with H2 and some paragraphs, and then you're going to have a footer at the bottom. I'm going to flesh this out just by copying this article and pasting it twice more down at the bottom just to sort of flesh out my page. Save it, refresh it in the browser. And there we have it. We have a full web page with our main heading, our 3 articles, and our paragraph content. And when we look at this, visually we can see that it's broken up into sections. As we work with CSS later, we'll see more, we'll use more visual cues to break up chunks of the content. So there you have it, how we use headings and how we use paragraphs and how we use them in conjunction with the things we talked about in a previous video. Header, articles, and footer. Thanks for watching.